Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the bowl games that are going on this weekend that have already gone on this week, and then the FCS playoff. Something that I still don't think gets nearly enough love in the national college football space. I get it. I understand why it doesn't. I still think it's an incredible thing that we all should take part in this upcoming weekend. But let's get into a little bit of a headline catch up. One that I just saw on my phone 2 seconds ago. It looks like Jaden Baugh might be entering the portal. I'd watch Texas very closely. Just hired their running back coach, Jabbar Jalouk. I would tend to believe that Texas is in the lead there in a number of different facets, both with the running back coach and probably in the checkbook. We'll talk about that more next week, including all of the transfer portal news, a lot of stuff flying around with Dylan Raiola and the quarterbacks, but just wanted to get that one out there. Could be losing a running back over there in Gainesville. Could be gaining one over there in Austin with plenty of other suitors out there, I promise you that. But let's go and jump into this, and let's get into Brian Smith has been fired at Ohio for cause. This is something that is still relatively hairy. The way that they put it was engaging in serious professional misconduct and participating in activities that reflect unfavorably on the university. Pretty boilerplate, pretty vanilla language. There's not much to take away from there. There were certain reports that came out yesterday. I don't want to say anything that's not true. I don't want to say anything that's not substantiated. So I'll leave it alone for the time being. We will see what happens here. Obviously, when you get fired for cause, there's something to be talked about. How serious it is, how much it affects his future, we'll find out. The short, for now, this is a really solid job that can do a lot of really special things that a lot of candidates might be interested in, whether from the group of five level or power four offensive coordinators being interested. I'd watch this one really closely, but doesn't look great for Brian Smith. We'll see how actually damning it is as more information comes out. Again, don't want to say anything that's not totally correct at this very moment. Joel Klatt had a quote this last week that made a lot of people mad, including myself, and not all of it made me mad. I want to make that very clear. But there were certain parts of this that were outright insane. Joel Klatt was on The Next Round, a great podcast that does a lot of different college football and college sports talk in general, and they were talking about the G5 situation. And Joel Klatt had some choice words for the NCAA basketball tournament. The quote goes like this, and he's talking about football in this case. We don't want Cinderellas. We want the best teams playing each other at the end. And he goes on a little diatribe in the middle, but he finishes it off with, the NCAA basketball tournament is a joke. It's the dumbest tournament and the least fair tournament in all of sports. Let's just take that second part for half a second. He's remarkably wrong. First of all, I like the idea of a Cinderella. I would love the idea of a football Cinderella. I don't think it's going to happen in really any sense of the word, and we'll talk about that here in a second, but the NCAA basketball tournament is incredible. And the other part of that is no one ever said it was meant to crown the perfect champion. I would argue the CFP in some ways doesn't always crown the perfect champion. So that's not really what college sports is about. And maybe this is a conversation more to be kind of drawn out a little bit more later. College sports is about kind of regionality and winning your conference and battling it out with the people right around you. I get we've kind of lost that, so now it's about the national championship and just about nothing else. But the reality is, it's never really about crowning the perfect champion or making sure that you have the exact right team. It's never going to be the exact right team. I would argue Ohio State last season wasn't the exact right team, but they put it together at the end and they played incredible football that I don't think anyone else in the country was capable of playing. So I'm more than fine with them being a champion. I believe they were the best team last year. I don't think it always works out that way, and I don't think that's a terrible thing. The other part of it, when they were talking about we don't want Cinderellas / we want the best teams playing at the end. The idea that we can't have both the best teams playing at the end and inclusion for the G5 is a little bit ridiculous to me. I understand that you want as many great teams in the playoff as you possibly can get. I understand that Notre Dame is almost definitely beating Tulane and JMU by a pretty comfortable margin. I'd say the same thing for Vanderbilt, say the same thing for Texas and BYU. I would argue the 12 best teams in the country are not in the playoff. I totally understand that. I agree with a lot of people because of that. If we get to the Final Four and it's Texas Tech or Oregon, and it's Indiana, it's Georgia, it's Ohio State, are we really going to bemoan the fact that JMU got a spot? Are we really going to be so angry that the G5 even got a chance in this bracket? Because that's the best teams playing at the end. That's the four best teams in the country, Texas Tech, Indiana, Georgia, and Ohio State, as we've decided throughout the 12 games. and they're playing at the end. We do get the best at the end, but we also get to include a G5 team that's had a remarkable season and deserves recognition. Now, I've said this before, and I will say this a million times over. I don't think the G5 will ever be a threat to win a national title, and I think the G5 playoff is the move going forward. I think that is a great place for the G5 to have a jumping off point. I think they can do incredible things with that and make quite a bit of money in the meantime. That being said, they don't want to do that. You can't sell someone on something they absolutely don't want to do. The other part of that is you are boxing out a massive part of the sport. Whether it's justified or not, I would argue it's relatively justified in a lot of ways in the game of football. It doesn't mean you're not boxing out a certain part of the sport that could have a special team. Now, I don't think it's all that likely, but I would argue Boise State a season ago is more than deserving of getting into the playoffs. So I just don't think we should talk in absolutes. Now, if there's a way to find a middle ground of the G5 has to be in the top 15 to be in the CFP. Now, I hope they don't cook the books to make sure they're not in the top 15 in that case, which I worry they would be. But at the end of the day, if that's something that we find out and we find a way to do that equitably and fairly, I'm with that. That makes sense to me. I think that is a fair way to move forward. That being said, the idea that we just have to cut it clean and we have to make sure no G5 teams get in because they have no shot, I'd argue there's plenty of other teams that prove they don't have a shot or don't deserve a shot to go win a national title, and maybe JMU did that this year. It wasn't perfect. Maybe they're not an elite team. Maybe they'll get beat by 45 on Saturday. It doesn't mean they didn't do something special this year, and it doesn't mean they shouldn't be recognized. We can disagree on the way the playoff should work. I tend to believe a G5 playoff will be an incredible thing for those teams. They don't think that, at least not as of right now. And I don't think it's a travesty to the world that the G5 finds their way in, and I really don't think it's a travesty that two of them found their way in because the ACC is that incompetent this year. That's really all I got for you. Now, he did have a correct point in there that should be said and should be talked about a little bit more. The G5's only in the playoff to avoid getting sued. That's true. That's absolutely true. The CFP wants to make sure they don't get in trouble with antitrust laws, and that's a totally true thing. It's unfortunate, but it is absolutely true. And that's something that will have to be talked about as we move forward, and as the CFP continues to get talked about, we'll see what happens. And I think everyone understands Saturday has a lot to do with what the future of the G5 looks like in the playoff. I don't think they can really compete. I don't think they can win a national title. It doesn't mean I don't think they deserve the recognition of being in the playoff at the end of the season, and I think that's where a lot of people disagree. That's where me and Joel Klatt disagree in a little bit of ways, but I think we agree in a lot more ways than we don't. But obviously, we'll see how this develops. We'll see if the Cinderella finds their way into the second round, and then that'll probably change the conversation for the wrong reasons, but at the end of the day, it'll change the conversation. The ACC might have done the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my entire life, guys. It's the ACC expanding to a 9-game schedule next season for 12 teams. And then 5 teams are going to play 8 games. And you guessed it, Florida State and Clemson are in those 5 teams because schedule balance. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in my entire life. I don't understand how they thought of this idea. I don't understand how they greenlit this idea especially. But this is what happens when you have a conference that is far too big, that has multiple of its members that don't really want to be a part of it very much longer, and have leadership that are a little bit lost right now. That's just what the ACC is. That's why this season was such a nightmare. That's why these tiebreakers are a true nightmare. And the crazier part about it is they were asked about the tiebreaker scenarios. What happens if you have an 8-0 team against an 8-1 team? Who gets preferential treatment? Is the 8-0 team because they're undefeated? 8-1, did they have to play that extra game? Well, they'll be very mad. I can promise you that. The ACC basically said we'll figure it out later. They didn't have an answer. They didn't know exactly how they were going to handle that. They said, we'll figure that out. This is going to be a mess. A team like Georgia Tech, who plays 8 games, could finish, let's say, 7-1. And Miami finds a way. They play 9 games, and they finish 7-2. Who gets in? Who deserves to get in? I think both teams have a good gripe to get into the title game. They better pray there's 2 undefeated teams and no one else, because that's the only way this makes sense. And frankly, I would be mad if I was an 8-1 team that played 9 games and I lost out to an 8-0 team that played 8. It doesn't make sense. It's a really, really, really bad move, and it puts this conference in an even worse position moving forward, both for their title and their prospects for the playoff. I don't understand it. It's silly as can be. There's no doubt about that. It is absolutely ridiculous, and I can't imagine it is going to go perfectly. In fact, I imagine it's going to go truly terribly. And I think in 2027 they're expanding to all but one team plays 9 games. It's ridiculous, and it's entirely the fault of the ACC and one team up there in South Bend that just refuses to join that conference. Again, more to talk about later on all of this, but just a ridiculous decision from the ACC here. Let's talk about some best bets, though. Let's try to get on the right foot for the CFP. I'll take the Texas A&M Miami over 51.5. I think these defenses are very good. I think these guys are difference makers. I think Casey Concepcion, I think Malachi Toney, I think Mario Craver, I just think they're difference makers. I think CJ Daniels. It's too hard to cover these guys one-on-one, especially one-on-one. If A&M's going to cover Malachi Toney that way, it's going to be a long afternoon. He is going to make big-time plays because that's just who he is. I think he is probably the best football player that will step foot on the field in College Station on Saturday, and I think there's going to be points. I think it's going to be a little bit of a track meet early, and then the defenses start to settle in, and we have a really, really fun game down to the wire that has quite a bit of points in it. I'll take Ole Miss minus 17.5 over Tulane. I think they want to prove a point. Now, a lot of people have kind of pushed back on this fact because they think a lot of the players are finding their way over to Baton Rouge with Lane Kiffin at the end of this. I tend to agree with a lot of those people, whether you want to talk about Trinidad Chambliss or Kejuan Lacey. I tend to believe they're going to find their way over to Baton Rouge. That doesn't mean they don't want to prove that they're more than Lane Kiffin. That doesn't mean that the seniors, especially on this team like Suntarian Perkins and all of these really, really talented guys, we got Caden Lee that might be playing his last game as a Rebel, or one of them. He wants to prove a point. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And I think they want to jump on these teams. I think both Ole Miss and Oregon want to jump on their teams and kind of put them away pretty early. Maybe be able to rest a couple of guys late in these games, as upsetting as that sounds. I think Ole Miss finds a way to pull away pretty early, and then Kejuan Lacey just takes over this football game. I'll take Alabama, minus 1.5 over Oklahoma. This is really, really weird because I don't have any strong feelings one way or the other. I'm leaning on my belief in Ty Simpson. I'm leaning on my belief in Kalen DeBoer, and I think they'll be ready to respond. I think that guy's too smart of an offensive coach to not have a couple of answers. It will not be explosive play after explosive play. I can almost promise you that. But I think they'll find a way to win this one by at least a field goal. I think they'll find a way to slowly outpace this team, and Ty Simpson will make one massive throw in this football game that will change the entire identity of it. Oregon JMU over 47.5. I'm a little bit nervous about this one, but I like points. In Eugene, I like a lot of them coming from the Oregon Ducks, as you can imagine. But this is a team that I think is just going to hit their stride, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But they are going to find a way to get a little bit more healthy. I don't know if DeCoria Moore or Gary Bryant. I imagine Evan Stewart won't play in this game just out of precautionary reasons unless they absolutely need him, which I don't expect that to be the case. I think they'll have answers for JMU up front. I think they'll find a way to get a couple of big-time turnovers. And then I think they might get a little bit over-aggressive on defense, and JMU finds a way to break a couple of big-time runs or a couple of big-time throws. I don't think it's going to be huge. I think JMU maybe scores 14 in this game, but I think they find a way to push this thing over 48.5 or 47.5, excuse me. I think Oregon puts up quite a bit of those points, the lion's share of those points, but JMU finds a way to add on just enough to get us over at least to 48. And one of my futures, I'll take Oregon to win the national title. This is a gamble, but I think this Oregon team has a chance to do something really special in this playoffs. If DeCoria Moore is healthy for this football game or for the one that they play next, hypothetically next against Texas Tech, if I can get Gary Bryant Jr. back, if I can get Evan Stewart back, this team is as dangerous as can be offensively. I think they might have the best offensive line in the entire field. Their running game is as comprehensive and it has as many guys as you could possibly want. Dante Moore is actually using his legs very effectively the last couple of weeks. And they got difference makers all over the field, especially if Evan Stewart and DeCoria Moore are back on that football field. Then Kenyon Sadiq is just wide open all game, and he's a nightmare. He's the best tight end in the country as far as I'm concerned. I think this is going to be awesome. It's going to be an awesome, awesome team to watch. I think they have a JMU team they should be able to handle and take a little bit of time off in the second half against. I think they're going to jump on Texas Tech, a team that hasn't quite played the talent level and the physicality level of a team like Oregon. I think the revenge factor against Indiana is very real, and then they're healthy and rolling, and they got one more game to win a national title. against either maybe Ohio State, maybe Georgia, maybe someone else makes a run. But regardless, I think this Oregon team is special. I think they have so much juice rolling in their direction, and I think they're getting healthy at the right time. And I think people forget just how good Evan Stewart is at football. If he's back on the football field, everything changes for this team very, very quickly. But it's going to be an awesome weekend. I think there are so many games that can do really, really special things. Obviously, two of them are outpacing the other two. I don't think that has to be said. I don't think that's disrespectful to Tulane or JMU. It doesn't mean I won't be watching those games very closely. It doesn't mean those games don't mean the world to those kids, whether it's Jake Retzlaff on Tulane, whether it's Alonze Barnett on JMU, Wayne Knight. It's a special game. And it's two teams that have earned a spot in this playoff, whether you like the rules or not. They have earned a spot in this playoff. They deserve a shot to get out on that football field and prove themselves. We'll see what happens. And it'll be really, really fun to watch. And I think we'll be coming off two games that more than delivered. So I don't think you'll have to worry too much if you don't quite get the games you want to get over there in Oxford and in Eugene. But it's going to be a fun weekend. Buy into it all. I understand it's a little bit easy to bemoan the fact that we got two relatively predictable blowouts coming out this weekend. You never know. It's college football, and even if you do know, let's enjoy the moment. Let's enjoy these teams taking the field on Saturday and on Friday. It's going to be really, really fun to watch. I'll put out my full college football playoff predictions tomorrow on my X and Instagram, so check that out, JACFB podcast. It's going to be really hard to pick the rest of the way, but feel pretty confident about what I got this upcoming weekend. Going to be really, really fun to watch all of this unfold. But thank you so much for tuning into this edition of Just Another College Football Podcast. Please do like, subscribe, comment. It means the absolute world to me, helps things keep going here. And I think we're about to kick up into gear because we got a transfer portal that's going to be absolutely on fire. A lot of stuff to keep on track of. But we'll be back on Monday. We'll break it all down. We'll break down all of the games, do a little bit of early look at some of the games coming up later in the month. It's going to be really fun. Enjoy it all. Thank you so much for tuning in. Like, subscribe, comment, do all that great stuff. And I'll see you guys on Monday.